Hi again. Welcome to the very first 5 Books bonus edition. In my conversation with award-winning author Dara Horn, I tapped into her professor mode and was fascinated by a deep dive she went into about the Tevye story. It didn't quite fit into the episode, but I'm guessing you'll be as riveted as I was, so I'm going to share that with you as well. Enjoy.
As English language readers, we come to this expectation of literature as being something that is supposed to be redemptive, right? It's like the main character is supposed to be saved, right? If that doesn't happen, the main character is supposed to have an epiphany. If that doesn't happen, the main character is supposed to have like a moment of grace. These are all really Christian terms. None of that stuff happens in Yiddish literature. Like, no one's ever saved, obviously. No one ever has a moment of grace. No one ever has an epiphany. Like, it's just, instead, these characters just keep on enduring. I mean, it's this masterclass in resilience. And with what Shalom Aleichem does in this book is it takes you through this like history of the Jews in the Russian Empire. And it goes from the 1890s until the last episode he writes this like I think it's in 1913 or 14. It's like, but I mean, it takes you through like the first Russian Revolution, the first Russian Constitution, and each of the daughters' marriages is a confrontation with a different one of these political challenges to Russian Jews. I could go on with this. I've taught this before. As you can tell, I give lectures about this. So maybe I'll stop now. But there's a lot of, there's so many pieces to it that are so misunderstood. I could even just briefly say like the Chava episode. Suffice it to say that at the end of the Yiddish book, Chava is abandoned by her non-Jewish husband and returns to her family.
I am curious, if you just take us through the daughters, what are their historical problems that they're...
Yes. Okay, sure. So, the first daughter is, Heintige Kinder, the Today's Children is the name of that chapter about Seitel. And that's actually the one that the play, The Fiddler on the Roof, is most loyal to the book. That's the one where, she wants to marry this man that she loves instead of this, arranged marriage. And then he manages to fool his wife by pretending to have this dream. In the book, it's a little more ambiguous. Like, is she actually fooled, or does she know that? Because there's an implication that Laser Wolf, that he's an abuser, that he killed his first wife. Not that he killed his first wife, but there's some hints that this is a dangerous marriage. And then also there's sort of this running joke through that episode, which is that this is an impossible match because Tevye is a dairyman and this guy is a butcher, and then milk and meat can't go together. There's a lot of pieces to this, but that is really more about sort of a more generic, generation gap, that the young people don't want to do these traditional marriages anymore, right? That is sort of a common story that you find happening in other cultures also, that, this is a traditional culture where there's a traditional, arranged marriage, and that's young people rebelling against that. That part's very common. The second story about Huddle is about this, how the communist movement seduced young Jews and then destroyed their lives, right? Because Pfefferl, they give him a different name in the play, Perchik or whatever. I forget what his name is in the play, but Huddle's husband is a communist. And at the end, he's apprehended by the Tsarist authorities. He's sent to Siberia. She then follows him to Siberia. I mean, this is an absolutely tragic story about this, this communist movement that seduced Jews basically in the hope of a better life of more freedom, and then ate them alive. The last line of that chapter is Tevye says to Shalom Aleichem, as he, says goodbye to Huddle forever as she's leaving to join him in Siberia, where she's not even going to see him. She's just going to be near him where he's in prison. And he's never going to see her again. And he says, Shalom Aleichem, let's talk about something more pleasant. Do you have any news about the cholera epidemic in Odessa? And that's that's the relationship with the Jews with communism. It's this romance that goes, that ends up being an abusive marriage. The Chava story sold out print runs when it was published in 1905. I think it's 1905. Tsar Nicholas III had what he called the 1/3 plan for the Jews of the Russian Empire, where what he was going to do was he was going to kill 1/3 of them, convert 1/3 of them to Christianity, and then force 1/3 of them to emigrate to America. The convert 1/3 to Christianity piece, one of the ways this was done was by having people who were, through the church, were seducing young Jewish women into the church. That's what that episode is about. I mean, this is not, we think of, it was presented in the Broadway play for an audience of American Jews who have, many intermarriages among them this is an intermarriage. That's not what this is. There's no such thing as intermarriage. The Jewish woman converts to Orthodox Christianity. She's kept in the priest's custody in the book. Like, she's a prisoner in the home of the priest. This is like, she's a catch for the priest. So that's the third chapter. I mean, Sprinza, this is another, it's after there's this massive stock market crash, and there are all these wealthy people who are, and there's a pogrom in Kiev, and there are all these people who are trying to get out of Kiev. And so the wealthy Jews of Kiev come to their dachas, their country homes in this area where Tevye is living. And then one of them seduces Tevye's daughter, Sprinza. It seems pretty clear between the lines that he gets her pregnant, but then Tevye thinks this is going to be a marriage. He doesn't even know about this pregnancy, but really this young man is just taking advantage of his daughter. And that's sort of this collapse of this Jewish community after these pogroms in Kiev, which Shalom Aleichem happened to have survived pogrom in Kiev, which was supposed to be not where you're supposed to have a pogrom, right? This is like a sophisticated city. I mean, I could keep going. Belka, the last daughter, she does what her father always wanted and marries a rich man. He's this like new money. He loses his fortune in the Russo-Japanese War. So she married him only for the money, and then he doesn't have any money, and they end up having to run away from his creditors to America, and they become like slaves in a New York City sweatshop. It is a really tragic story. Yeah, it's really bad. I could keep going, but I'll stop.
I think we're all going to look at the play and all of the adaptations much differently after hearing that. Thank you.